Well, today I'm going to set up this Frantz oil bypass filter system. Um, the primary reason is just to get better filtration. I'm not going to change my oil drain interval, but definitely anything you can do to filter the oil, make it cleaner, is going to be beneficial. Primarily, there's diesel engines generate a lot of soot. And that soot particle is actually an abrasive particle. Different oils can accommodate that particle a little bit better in terms of, I guess there's really a whole list of different performance properties. But, and like I say, I'm not going to change the oil drain interval. I'm just going to try to do what I can to make it cleaner. And this Frantz system has actually been around for quite a long time, and I think that this is actually what they refer to as new old stock. It's just something it was new in the box. I got the whole kit. It's actually just the toilet paper inside. It's a special, really the type of toilet paper roll you want is high density pack, the single ply. And if you take a look here, you're just going to tap into the oil system, and you can look on the center there. I don't know if I can look that in there or not. The hole inside there, let's see if I can get a little bit better shot here. Maybe. Yeah, oil is going in fine, just a normal size. There's a little bit of a restriction, but you can definitely tell on the outlet there, barely you can tell, that see if I can even turn on the, well, anyway, there's a small orifice, so it's definitely a flow control item where only a certain portion of your oil is actually getting bypassed and put into the filter. So, I'll go ahead and put this on in here today, and I'll, if you were to take this thing off here, just a quick release here, you'll find that there's a toilet paper roll in here. And you can do all sorts of searches on Frantz oil filter, and there's a whole bunch of stuff on the YouTube. And when I'm hooking this thing on up, I want to use the best fittings possible. So, I'm pretty much going to be using a Arrow Quip here fittings, as well as I went on out and made a set of braided hose here. So you don't want to lose oil pressure due to a leak anywhere in the system, so I'm just using the best stuff I can put my hands on. Definitely don't want to destroy the engine, springing a leak with the goal of trying to make the engine last longer. So I'll show you here where I'm going to plan on putting this thing, as well as where how this thing is actually going to plumb up on the bottom there. Okay, here's the actual Frantz, I guess new old stock retail box. If you open it on up here, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of different fittings here with the kit, as well as the hose inside there. I don't know if you can see that very well or not. Yeah. I opted for, again, the braided hose just because I wanted this thing to be as durable as possible. I'll give you a whole bunch of paper in here too. So, as far as what I bought, I don't have the part number for some of these, but these are Arrow Quip fittings, steel fittings here. I think this is aluminum, but the main part here is steel. Again, I got what I thought was pretty good stuff. I got the 6 foot of this stuff. You can see here what the part number is. Hopefully you can see that. FCA 0406, and then these are the AN fittings here that you hook your these fittings up to. So that's the part, and then these are of course the 1/8 inch NPT fittings that fit up to an AN number 2. So we need 3 of these guys, and the one oddball here is the one that comes right out of goes back into the crankcase. That one is a 3/8 inch NPT, so you can see an FCM 2519. So I think I think that's it, other than, like I say, these AN fittings. And one thing I bought is I also bought that T for hooking up the oil pressure sensor. I mean, that's just optional. So I think that's it for as far as the parts list. Okay, well, this is the oil filter housing itself. You can see the port. I don't know if I can put my finger there or not. But the port for pressure is right over here in the corner here. Now that's a 1/8 inch NPT. So that's where the oil is coming on out, and I'm going to run that on up with, of course, the AN fitting, and run it on up to the oil filter there. And the return line is right next to it over here. So this is actually just dumping it right back into the oil pan. So my return fitting is right here, my oil pressure is on the other side there. So I'm just going to hook these guys on up with those AN fittings with the braided hose, and run that up to the firewall, and that should be pretty much it. So I think the next photo you'll see is hopefully everything completed. Just want to give a quick little update here. The plug for the return line is a little bit of an oddball size. 1/4 inch drive won't fit. It's too small. I'm sorry, it's too small in there. And then a 3/8 drive won't fit. And it turns out that it's something in between. And I just used a screwdriver that had been the right size. I'm actually using a 5/16 or number 8 wrench and that fits it perfectly. So that'll give you some idea about what the size of that square is. But you might want to figure out what the right tool is for that before you pull that plug on out and try to hook this stuff on up. So that's it for right now. Oh, by the way, that plug over in the very far top left there, that is for the coolant. So you definitely don't want to pull out the wrong one. If you ever do a coolant flush, that's one of the ways that you can just fill up the thing with water and flush it. And of course flush any debris that may be inside your block. So that's it. Okay, just went ahead and put all those fittings on in and tighten everything on up. There's a little bit of oil that'll come on out there. I've had the truck sitting here for a couple days so there's just a very little, I mean it wasn't a lot here. You can see there's just a little bit of a wet stream there. So you know, that worked out pretty well. And surprisingly, there's not a lot of clearance between that fitting right there and the casting, but with this particular setup, that worked out okay. That I had enough there to be able to clear it put a wrench on it and tighten it on up. So at least as far as the bottom goes here, everything looks pretty darn good. And I also went through and I used Aerotech fittings and steel fittings, and even the hose there I believe is Aerotech. This is one place you don't really want to cheap out on. Okay, I've got everything buttoned up from the bottom end. I've got my end fittings for the return line, which is right there, over that guy right there. And of course I got the high pressure, which is blocking the light there, but it's that one by the oil filter. Everything's set on up, and I've ran some hose. I cut it kind of in a spiral fashion all the way on up there. Can't really see too well there. But anyway, it's spiral run all the way on up and tie wrap, just like you see right here. And the idea is that I don't want these braided hoses here to chafe any of the electrical wires, which are right next to the cap up there. And plus, it keeps this stuff from kinking, so it's just a good way of protecting the hoses. So I think on the bottom end, that's pretty much it. Everything looks pretty good. Alright, so this is what I got from the top. Of course, the input there is in the center, and the output is on that perimeter, more or less. And I put a T in here, and the reason I put a T in here is I wanted to have another oil pressure sensor in the system. I don't like the idea that I don't really know what the oil pressure is. Of course, you get the oil pressure gauge in the dash, but you know, I'd like to know a little bit more about what the actual value is. And especially when you're hooking in this secondary bypass oil filter system, it'd be kind of nice to know if there's any issues at all with the oil pressure. So I've got this all plumbed on in. This is actually a glow gauge set on up. All of this is 1/8 inch NPT. I have that Frantz set up all completed here, and I had used conduit and bent it on up to, you know, fit in that little area. It seemed to be the best thing to use to try to get this thing to conform to the right position. And keep in mind, you also want to look at the height of the top of this to make sure that the hood doesn't hit it when you actually close the hood. So then I also have a little pressure transducer on there to monitor the oil pressure, and there's a little T on that. So I think that's pretty much it. You can see a little side view over here. Pretty tight area. You want to keep as far away as you can from the brake reservoir. Keep in mind that this thing is going to get around 200 degrees, and you know, you want to isolate the heat as much as you can. Not that the brake fluid is going to boil, but nonetheless, it's something you want to minimize if you can. And one other thing about Frantz is that there's a couple different types of clamps that hold this thing down. And I've got the, you know, like a little clip piece right here. It's like you just pull this on back, and it's, can you see it? Yeah, there's a lip, and there's like a little wire that secures it. And there is another configuration that it has like a screw type, and the screw type is a little bit more advantageous because you know, you can actually tighten it up to whatever it is that your desired tension, whereas this is you set it, and you know, whatever the tension is, that's what it is. And if that's sealed for whatever reason on the cup there would get a little dried out, or maybe I could squish, and maybe is a better way to say it, and it doesn't seal as well, then there's not much you can do about keeping this thing from leaking, other than just setting up a little valve on the bottom and turning this thing on off if you should ever have problems with it. I do want to say one other thing about oil change. Keep in mind that there's your oil, at least for a diesel, is specifically formulated to do a lot of different things. You know, it's got all sorts of additives in there, you know, that minimize the sludge deposits, viscosity increase, and there's a whole bunch of chemistry that goes in it. And the oil can certainly look clean, but you know, clean oil does not necessarily mean that it has the right additives in it to keep your oil, or keep your, you know, the deposits and the sludge and the like I say, the viscosity increase and so forth from negatively having an impact on your engine. So I look at this as a supplement to the current filtration system, not as a way of extending the oil drain interval. So that's it. I'll give you a little sense of what this looks like inside. That's a banjo clip there that just snaps in place. You get your, of course, the screen down there. When you want to change oil, you just give it some time, and all that oil will flow back into your pan. And as far as the inside of your container here, it's just a roll of toilet paper that is highly densely packed. And when I change this again, I'm going to, of course, get the recommended brand that is sold for this sort of like a cartridge. But I think you can actually buy stuff off the shelf, but you definitely don't want to get the loose stuff. You want to get the, you know, like the single ply that's highly densely packed. And so it's more or less just pull that little hoop on out there, and when you change oil, and that's pretty much it. And I think that's it for the job. I'm just gonna go ahead and snap this together, fire up the truck, and hopefully I won't find any leaks. And if that's not the case, then I guess I'm pretty much done. It's getting a little dark on out, but you can see the Frantz oil filter here slugged on up, and it's got a little bit of clearance right there between the two. A little tight with the that brake switch. There's also a little air pressure sensor, or I'm sorry, I think the air temperature sensor here that you can't see very well. It's on the air box, but that's, yeah, maybe you can see down there. That seems to be fit okay, and of course it doesn't look too bad here on the side. Plenty of clearance. So I think that's pretty much it. And there's a profile here. Let's see if you can look here. You can see that it's a little bit lower than the airbox top. And if you look at the hood, you'll find that that there's a little bit of a structural piece that protrudes from the hood right after you get by this airbox. So you're gonna have to make sure that that thing is below that protrusion from the hood for the reinforcement. So other than that, I think that's it for this project.